Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much to the team for inviting me. It really is a pleasure to be here, and I've enjoyed this morning so far tremendously. So, yeah, clinical trials in bone disease. I'm going to highlight two trials that I've been involved with. In fact, Dublin were centres in both of them, as you'll see. So, there are conflicts of interest there. And the two trials I'm going to be talking about are the so-called ZiPP trial, which stands for Zoledronate and the Prevention of Paget's Disease, and the TOPaZ trial, which is an osteogenesis imperfecta. Now, the Paget's disease variety in ZiPP was people who had a mutation or a pathogenic variant in the SQ-STM1 gene. Prevalence about that, 1 in 5,000, whereas OI, a bit more rare, 1 in 10,000. Okay, so starting off with Paget's, a very mixed audience. Many of you may not have heard of Paget's. It's a rare bone disease. It's actually, the world capital is the northwest of England, Manchester, in fact. But even then, it's quite uncommon now. It used to be more common. The abnormality of Paget's, in Paget's, is that you get an abnormality in what's called bone remodeling. Like the bone remodeling process, which is normally very orderly and proceeds at a slow rate, just goes crazy. And the bones remodel at a rapid rate and become bent and weak and deformed. And there's a patient with Paget's disease of the radius, and there's a lady who I took care of when I was working in Aberdeen, a pathogenic fracture of the femur. Now, genetic factors play a role, and this gene, SQSTM1 or sequestosome 1, that is the most important risk factor. So the rationale for the ZiPP trial was that Paget's disease in clinical practice often presents at an advanced stage by the time the bones are already bent, there's already arthritis, or there's already been fractures. And of course, you cannot wind that back. So the idea of the ZiPP trial was to ask the question, if we tested for this mutation or variant, and we intervened early with a drug called zoledronic acid, which turns down bone turnover. Okay, Paget's bone turnover really high, zoledronic acid brings it down. Could that prevent the development or progression? So that was the rationale. So here's the study design. We did a lot of genetic testing, and we tested 750 so-called probands, like people with Paget's, but we tested their unaffected relatives. So these were people that were the children, age 50 odds, of people who were much older who had Paget's disease. Out of those 750, 350 tested positive, 128 declined to take part, and we randomized 222, 111 to zoledronic acid, 111 to placebo. The follow-up was quite long. It wasn't meant to be that long. It was one of these two trials went through COVID, so it was longer than it was longer than anticipated. But the duration of follow-up was nearly 7 years actually, and 90 completed, which isn't bad, all things considered. Now, quickly going on to the baseline characteristics. A bit of a busy slide. The thing that I'd like to highlight here in the red is that actually these people, age 50, their mum or dad had Paget's disease. They thought they were absolutely well. Actually, about 10% of them already had Paget's disease, but they didn't know it, okay? They didn't have symptoms. Slightly more females than males, about 55% female in both groups. So, what were the results? Well, as I've alluded to, we already had about 10% of people with bone lesions, that is actually Paget's disease at the baseline visit. As it turned out, and just by chance, there were more lesions in the placebo group. There was 29 bone lesions. By lesions, I mean bones affected. Okay, separate bones affected, but a smaller number in the ZA group. When we looked at evolution of lesions, no one in the ZA group got new lesions. 2 in the placebo group got new lesions. And the number of people with lesions at the end of the study, there was only 1 in the ZA group and 14 in the placebo group. And the number of lesions was also hugely different, 2 in the ZA group compared with 28 in the placebo group. So a very clear effect of zoledronic acid. And I've just graphed that. So this is what it looks like. So lesions disappeared, 86.7%. The lesions went away completely on bone scan. And the remaining 13.3%, the 13.3%, sorry, let's go forward, they improved a lot. In the placebo group, only 1 disappeared, but 41% appeared to improve a bit, but 41% were static or worse, and 1.8% had new lesions. I'll just show you what that looks like on the bone scan. These are bone scans, and if you have Paget's disease, the bone scan shows up black, affected bones show up black here. So here's a patient at the baseline on placebo, a bit of Paget's disease in this vertebra, T12, and you can see it's gotten a lot worse by the end of the study. And here's a ZA patient. This is Paget's disease of the pelvis, and it's completely disappeared at the end of study. Just another couple of examples. A placebo patient, the patient had Paget's in the distal humerus, got worse by the end of study, and a new lesion developed in the lumbar spine. And this is one patient's skull at baseline, and a new lesion developed in the skull at the end of study. We call that osteoporosis circumscripta. So a very clear advantage to the ZA. The other thing that happened is, as we expect with this drug, it dampens down bone turnover. And these are what's called biochemical markers of bone turnover. One is called CTX, one is called P1NP, and it really goes down in the ZA group, and it remains down, that's CTX and P1NP, for up to 7 years plus. So a very long duration of action. So it was an interesting study. It tells us that we can use genetic testing and targeted intervention to favorably modify progression of Paget's. Treatment was well tolerated, very long duration of effect, and we're still following some of these patients up. So this could introduce a new treatment paradigm, if you like. You had a family history of Paget's, you could test for sequestosome 1 and put these patients under enhanced surveillance and possibly give them prophylactic therapy. So that is ZiPP. And as I mentioned, Dublin was a centre in ZiPP and in ZiPP-LTE. Next disease is osteogenesis imperfecta, otherwise known as brittle bone disease. This is 1 in 10,000, as I mentioned. The main impact, or a main impact of OI, is limb fractures, between 5 and 12 times more common in people with OI than the general population. They also get vertebral fractures. These are very common, affecting about 2/3 of patients. So what was the TOPaZ trial all about? Well, fractures are a major cause of morbidity. Drugs called bisphosphonates, ZA is a bisphosphonate, the one I've just talked about, are widely used, but have never really been shown to reduce fracture occurrence. There are no licensed treatments. And the question was, can teriparatide, which is a different type of bone drug which builds new bone, followed by the bisphosphonate ZA, reduce the risk of fractures in OI? So here's the overview of the design of TOPaZ. We enrolled 350 patients with OI, which is a considerable feat, actually, considering it's 1 in 10,000. 175 were allocated teriparatide, 175 standard care. And the teriparatide, they had that for 2 years. This is the normal posology we use in osteoporosis, so we followed that for OI. Then we gave a shot of zoledronic acid, and then we followed patients up. And fractures were the primary endpoint. There were very few exclusion criteria, so pretty much anyone with OI would be eligible. Here are the recruitment sites. As the speaker before coffee, you've got to have a network of patients to get this sort of thing going. And we had 29 centres, 25 in the UK, and good old Dublin coming to the fore again, one of the EU centres. We also have Aarhus, was one of our centres, Paris and Amsterdam. Okay, here's the timeline. Another trial that survived COVID. So this is a typical trial timeline. You start, nothing much is happening. You think, should I fold up this trial? But things gradually improved, mainly because the teriparatide was donated free by Eli Lilly. And there was a bit of resistance among centres to pay for it, but Eli Lilly donated it incredibly. And things went great. Then COVID hit, and then depression set in. But then gradually, recruitment picked up, and we made our target of 350. We've lost about 7%. Last patient, last visit was in February. And we're kind of in the middle of cleaning the data just now. Now, TOPaZ is much bigger than any previous trial, okay, a lot bigger, and it's the only trial to look at fractures. All of the others have looked at bone density. And time points, first patient 2017, last patient first visit November 2022. Database lock, we hope May 2025. We hope results are available in June 25. And we hope, President Trump willing, I may be able to go to the ASBMR this September. So there you go, TOPaZ. It is possible to conduct fracture trials in OI if you have a big enough network and you've got a lot of good collaborators, which I had, aiming to submit an abstract and watch this space for the results. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you. I'll just before I finish, maybe I could thank everyone that supported the trial, and also a shameless advert for my charity cycle run for the UK Pageants Association. And if you don't want to do this, see the QR code there, I'm going to nick one of your posters, actually, and replace that with a photograph of that. Thank you. Okay.
I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions for Stuart before we move on to the next session. And I must say, congratulations on 350 patients enrolled, and the length of time you've decided to make that trial for as well is really quite remarkable. Congratulations. And you couldn't do that in a single center. It's just not possible. That's a real measure of networking.
Oh, there's one.
That's a question? Yeah, we have a question at the back. And while I'm waiting for that, I think talking about Paget's disease, I was remembering when I was in medical school, we were told that the explanation for the north of England was the dogs and distemper and paramyxovirus or something. That's all gone, I hope.
Well, that rumbled along for a long time. It was thought paramyxovirus, RSV, measles. It's never been conclusively demonstrated. There has been a change in incidence, though. My feeling is it's better nutrition, much less in terms of osteomalacia and vitamin D deficiency. I think that is the change, but it's not been proven. Here's the lady at the back.
Hi, thank you very much for that presentation. I have just a question regarding the recruitment to the clinical trial. The patients in the placebo arm, obviously both arms are going through follow-up. Will they be able to avail of the treatment after follow-up?
Yeah. Is this in the ZiPP trial? Is this in the first trial I showed?
The first one specifically, but also the second one as well?
Exactly. So the first one, the patients on placebo, they didn't know they were on placebo. We didn't know they were on placebo. Obviously, once the trial finished, we broke the code, and then we followed them up. And people who were on placebo, who had lesions, well, we've said you could have treatment. You maybe had treatment. And mostly people, if they didn't have symptoms, haven't wanted treatment, but we have gone ahead and given some patients treatment. For the TOPaZ trial, it's slightly an active comparator, standard care. So patients can have bisphosphonates and other stuff. And, we're just about to end the trial now. And depending on the result, if teriparatide is better, then obviously that might be able to get offered to those patients, but we don't know that yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.